Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. That's how I met Marco. My name's Cora, and I was 28, working as a fitness trainer at a local gym, living a life as structured and disciplined as my fitness routines. That's until Marco walked in one day, looking for a quick workout, and ended up changing my whole life's course. "Hey, I'm Marco," he said, flashing a smile that could light up the darkest of rooms. "Heard this is the best place to get in shape. Mind showing me the ropes?" I raised an eyebrow, sizing him up. He didn't look like the usual gym type, more like he spent his days charming his way through life. "Sure, Marco. Follow my lead, and you'll be in shape in no time. But I warn you, I don't go easy on anyone." Marco chuckled, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Wouldn't have it any other way. Lead on, Cora." Training Marco was like trying to tame a wild stallion. He had energy for days and a stubborn streak to match. But beneath the jokes and easy banter, there was a genuine respect, a connection that neither of us could deny. The days turned into weeks, and our sessions at the gym became the highlight of my days. It wasn't just about the workouts anymore, it was the laughter, the stories, the shared moments in between the sweat and hard work. One evening, as we were wrapping up, Marco turned to me, a serious look replacing his usual grin. "Cora, I've got to tell you something. I'm not just here for the workouts. I'm here for you. You've got this fire, this strength that I've never seen in anyone else. And I'm crazy about you." I was taken aback. This was Marco, the guy who joked about everything, now standing in front of me, bare and honest. "Marco, I don't know what to say. You're not what I expected. But I can't deny it, there's something between us. Something real." That was the start of our whirlwind romance. It was intense, passionate, like a storm that sweeps everything in its path. And before I knew it, I was saying I do to the man who had walked into my gym and turned my world upside down. But the fairy tale didn't last long. After the wedding, Marco dropped a bombshell that would set the stage for the battles to come. "Cora, we need to move into my mother's house. I've got strong family ties, and it's important for me to be there for them." I felt my stomach drop. Maria, his mother, was a force to be reckoned with, her sharp tongue and critical eye a stark contrast to Marco's warmth. And then there was Sophia, his sister, a mirror image of her mother's arrogance and disdain. "Marco, are you sure about this? Your mother and Sophia, our relationship is strained, to put it mildly. Is this really the best idea?" I asked, trying to keep the worry out of my voice. Marco took my hands in his gaze earnest. "Cora, I know it's not ideal. But family is everything to me. We'll make it work, I promise. You, me, and our little family against the world." Moving into Marco's family home felt like stepping onto a battlefield every day. Maria's house was a fortress, her rules, her way, or the highway. And Sophia, she was like her shadow, echoing her mother's every frown and snide remark. "Morning, Cora," Maria would say, her voice dripping with something that was anything but warmth. "Don't forget the dishes need doing, and the living room needs a good dusting. We run a tight ship here." I'd nod, biting back the retort that threatened to spill. "Of course, Maria. I wouldn't want the house anything less than perfect." Sophia would smirk from her perch at the kitchen table, her eyes scanning me like I was some bug under a microscope. "Yeah, Cora. And try to keep up, will ya? We don't need any dead weight around here." The days were long, the work unending. It was like living in a loop, each day a repeat of the last. Cleaning, cooking, trying to find my footing in a house that felt more like a minefield. Marco was there, but not really. His restaurant was his world, and I was just a ghost in his family home. But then, life decided to throw me a curveball. I was pregnant. The news should have been a beacon of joy, but in Maria's house, it was just another ripple in already troubled waters. "Pregnant, huh?" Maria's voice was flat, her eyes hard. "Well, don't expect any special treatment. This house doesn't run itself, you know. I held my ground, my hand instinctively resting on my belly. I don't expect special treatment, Maria. But I do expect some understanding. I'm carrying a child, your grandchild. That shut her up, if only for a moment. But it didn't last. The chores piled up, the glares grew sharper, and the house felt smaller with each passing day. Sophia was no help. She watched me struggle, a satisfied smirk never far from her lips. "You're slowing down, Cora," she'd taunt. "Can't handle a bit of housework? What kind of mother are you gonna be?" I wanted to scream, to lash out. But I held it in. For Marco, for the tiny heartbeat that was growing stronger each day. The tension was a constant companion, an uninvited guest at every meal, every moment. Marco, he tried, in his way. But his family, his restaurant, they pulled him in 1,000 different directions, and I was just one more voice in the cacophony of his life. "Marco, talk to them, please," I pleaded one night, the weight of the day heavy on my shoulders. "Your mother, Sophia, they treat me like I'm nothing, like I don't belong." Marco sighed, a tired sound that spoke volumes. "Cora, they're just set in their ways. It's how they've always been. Just give it time, it'll get better." But it didn't get better. It got harder, the house more suffocating, Maria and Sophia more relentless. And me, I was just trying to keep my head above water, to protect the tiny life that depended on me. As I lay in bed each night, the moon casting shadows across the room, I made a silent vow. I wouldn't let them break me. I wouldn't let their words, their disdain, define me. I was stronger than they knew, and one day, they'd see. One day, this house, this battlefield, it would be mine to conquer. Becoming a mother was supposed to be the most beautiful chapter of my life. But in Maria's house, it felt more like a trial by fire. Luca was my little bundle of joy, my ray of sunshine in the storm. Yet, every cry, every smile, was overshadowed by the relentless pressure and criticism from Maria and Sophia. "Really, Cora, can't you keep that child quiet?" Maria would snap, her words sharp as knives, every time Luca so much as whimpered. I held Luca closer, whispering words of comfort, shielding him from the harshness of his own grandmother's words. "He's just a baby, Maria. Babies cry. That's how they communicate." Sophia would roll her eyes, her voice dripping with disdain. "Oh, please. You're just not doing it right, Cora. Maybe if you paid more attention to him instead of feeling sorry for yourself, he'd be quieter." Their words stung, each one a reminder of how out of place I felt in this house, in this family. But it wasn't just the words. It was the way they looked at me, the way they scrutinized my every move, especially after my body had changed from the pregnancy. The weight I'd gained became their favorite topic, a source of endless ridicule. "Looks like those fitness trainer days are long gone, huh, Cora?" Maria would chuckle, eyeing my figure with a smirk. "Better lay off the sweets if you want to fit into your old clothes again." I clenched my fists, forcing a smile to hide the hurt. "I'm proud of my body, Maria. It brought Luca into this world. The weight? It's temporary. But the love I have for my son, that's forever." But my words, my defiance, it didn't matter to them. I was the outsider, the intruder in their perfect little world. And no matter how hard I tried, it never seemed to be enough. Enough was enough. The constant belittling from Maria and Sophia wasn't just chipping away at my spirit, it was igniting a fire within me. A fire to reclaim my life, my body, and my self-respect. I decided to take my journey into my own hands, right there in the four walls of that suffocating house. I started simple, turning a corner of my room into my personal gym. It wasn't much, just a mat, some weights, and a determination as strong as steel. "This is it, Luca," I whispered to my little boy, cradling him in one arm while setting up my phone to record. "Mommy's turning it all around, starting now." The first few days were tough, the exercises leaving me breathless, my muscles screaming. But each drop of sweat, each aching limb, felt like a triumph. "Think you can just bounce back, Cora?" Maria sneered one day, watching me pant through my routine. It's not that easy, you know. Takes more than a few stretches to fix what's broken. I wiped my brow, fixing her with a steely gaze. Watch me, Maria. I'm not just fixing what's broken. I'm building something stronger. And I don't need your approval or your snide comments. That's when I decided to go public with my journey. I started a YouTube channel and an Instagram page, sharing every struggle, every victory. It was raw, it was real, and to my surprise, it resonated with so many out there. Mom, look at this. I'd say to Luca, showing him the screen filled with comments and likes. We're not alone. There are so many rooting for us. And then came the advertisers, their offers turning my little corner of the internet into a thriving source of income. I was stunned, overwhelmed, but above all, I was empowered. Can you believe this, Luca? I'd whisper, tucking him into bed. We're doing it. We're really doing it. But with every success, the tension in the house grew thicker. Maria and Sophia couldn't stand it, the way I'd turned their ridicule into my armor, their disdain into my driving force. What's this now, Cora? Playing the star while the rest of us do the real work? Sophia spat one day, her eyes venomous. I stood my ground, Luca on my hip, my heart stronger than ever. It's called turning the tide, Sophia. It's called taking back control. And if that bothers you, well, that's your problem, not mine. The house that once felt like a prison was now just a backdrop. My world was larger, brighter, filled with the love of my son and the support of a community that saw me, the real me. The success of my online channels was a sweet victory, but it brought a new kind of challenge. Marco was stunned by the numbers, the comments, the sheer scale of it. But his pride was bruised. He didn't want the world, especially his family, to see the shift in our roles. Cora, it's incredible. But you know how my mother and Sophia are. Please, let's keep this between us. I don't want them thinking I'm not the provider. He pleaded one evening, his eyes begging for understanding. I sighed, the weight of his request heavy on my shoulders. Marco, I'm proud of what I've achieved. It's not just about the money, it's about respect, about independence. He nodded, his hand reaching for mine. I know, and I respect that. But in this house, it's complicated. Let's just keep it our little secret, for now. I agreed, reluctantly, and began transferring $4,000 a month to Marco's account. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. Maria and Sophia continued their tirade, oblivious to the truth. They saw me as a leech, living off their precious son and brother. You're just a freeloader, Cora. Always taking, never contributing. Maria would snarl, her words sharp as ever. I bit back my retort, the secret of my success a silent shield against her barbs. I contribute in my own way, Maria. Not that you'd ever acknowledge it. Sophia was no better. What do you even do all day, Cora? Lounge around while we do all the real work? Their ignorance was a bitter pill, but I swallowed it. My focus was Luca, my channels, my newfound strength. I'd walk with my son in the park, my camera a constant companion, capturing the moments, the workouts, the real me that they refused to see. Cora, you're wasting your time with those videos, Maria would scoff, watching me edit my latest post. But the numbers told a different story. The subscribers, the views, the comments, they were real, tangible. They were mine. Maybe to you, Maria. But to me, and to thousands out there, it's anything but a waste, I'd reply, my confidence unshaken. Marco's restaurant troubles added another layer to our already complicated life. He came to me one day, his pride barely holding back his desperation. Cora, the restaurant, it's struggling. I need help. Would you lend me some money? Just to tide things over? His vulnerability was a rare sight, and it tugged at my heartstrings. Of course, Marco. I'll help. But this isn't just a loan, it's an investment. In us, in our family. His relief was palpable, but it was tinged with the unspoken truth. I was the lifeline, the silent savior of the family facade. And as I transferred $10,000, as I watched the gratitude and the guilt in his eyes, I knew the balance had shifted. Time in that house felt like a ticking bomb, and each day brought us closer to the explosion. Sophia's marriage brought her husband, Rick, into an already cramped space. His presence only added to the chaos and tension that had become a constant in the house. "You two just take up space," Maria would sneer, her words cutting through the crowded living room. "You're nothing but freeloaders, Cora. You and that kid." I clenched my teeth, hugging Luca closer. "We're family, Maria. Or at least, that's what a house like this is supposed to mean." But when Sophia announced her pregnancy, Maria's attitude shifted into something even harsher, more direct. "This house is getting crowded, Cora. And frankly, you and your boy are just in the way." The words stung, but before I could muster a response, Marco dropped a bombshell of his own at dinner. "I have to go out of town for a few weeks. Restaurant business," he said, avoiding my gaze. A few weeks in this madhouse without even the slightest buffer Marco provided felt like a sentence I couldn't bear. "You're leaving? Now? With everything going on?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper over the lump in my throat. He didn't meet my eyes. "I have to, Cora. It's important." And just like that, he was gone. The door shut behind him, and the weight of his absence settled over the house like a thick fog. I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy for Luca. We went for our walks, did our workouts in the park, anything to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the house. But when we returned from kindergarten one day, the sight that greeted us froze me in my tracks. Our belongings, bags, suitcases, Luca's toys, were piled up outside the front door like garbage. "Mommy, what's happening?" Luca's small voice was laced with confusion and fear. I swallowed hard, fighting back the tears as I approached the door. "Maria, Sophia, what is this? Why are our things outside?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. The response came cold and merciless from the other side of the door. "You heard me, Cora. The house is too crowded, and you two are just taking up space. It's time for you to leave. Find somewhere else to call home." Maria's voice was like a knife, and Sophia's echoing laughter only twisted it deeper. I stood there, my whole world collapsing around me. And what should I tell Marco? What will you say to your son when he asks where his wife and child are? Their laughter was the only answer I got. It was clear, in their eyes, we were expendable, an inconvenience easily discarded. With a heavy heart and a mind swirling with shock and betrayal, I gathered our belongings. Holding Luca's hand tightly, I stepped away from the house that was never a home. The pain was sharp, the betrayal bitter, but it was the clarity of the moment that struck me the most. This was the end of one chapter, a chapter of struggle and pain. But it was also the beginning of something new, something ours. I rented an apartment, a small but safe haven for me and Luca. As I unpacked our lives, the reality of what had happened, of what I had escaped, began to sink in. I was alone, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope, a sense of freedom. Settling into the new apartment was a bittersweet experience. It was a safe haven for me and Luca, a place where the shadows of Maria's house couldn't reach us. I was meticulously arranging our belongings, trying to make the space feel like home, when my phone buzzed with a message that sent shockwaves through my world. It was from Sophia, her message laced with a sickening glee. "You think you know Marco? Think again, Cora." Attached was a link, a portal to a truth I had never imagined. Trembling, I clicked the link. The screen lit up with images that shattered my reality. There was Marco, not buried in restaurant woes, but in the arms of another woman. Their intimacy was undeniable, the photos a stark contrast to the lies he'd fed me. The most recent ones were dated just yesterday. The business trip, the stress he'd mentioned, it was all a facade, a cruel play where I was the unwitting financier. I felt numb, the pain and betrayal intertwining into a cold resolve. For years, I had been the backbone, the silent benefactor of a man who lived a double life, all while his family treated me like dirt. A week of turbulent emotions was broken by incessant calls from Marco. His voice, once a comfort, was now a trigger for my contempt. "Cora, please, you need to come back. Mom and Sophia crossed a line. And the restaurant, it's in shambles. I need you, Cora. The bills, they're piling up." The pleas that would have once pulled at my heartstrings now evoked nothing but disdain. "So you only need me to pay your bills and your family's bills?" His voice cracked, desperation seeping through. "We're still a family. You, me, Luca. Isn't that worth fighting for?" A bitter laugh escaped me. "A family? Is that what you call this charade?" "No, Marco. We're far from a family. And as for your restaurant, your debts? They're yours to deal with." Silence filled the line, heavy and uncomfortable. I could almost feel the weight of his predicament pressing down on him. "But Cora, the money, Your problem, Marco. Your restaurant, your money. I'm done being your lifeline." I cut in, my voice unwavering, strong. "However, we will discuss all this tomorrow. I will come to your mother's house." I made my decision. I'd return to that house, not as the broken woman they expected, but as the force they never saw coming. I'd face them, face Marco, Maria, and Sophia, armed with the truth and a plan that would turn their world upside down. Stepping into the house was like entering a lion's den. Marco's face lit up with a mix of hope and surprise, but Maria and Sophia's expressions were as cold as ice. They clearly weren't thrilled about my return. "Look who's back," Maria said, her tone dripping with disdain. "Missed us, have you?" I met her gaze, without flinching. "Not at all, Maria. I'm here for something important." I handed Marco the envelope, his face turning pale as he recognized it for what it was. "Divorce papers, Marco," I stated, the words tasting of freedom. "Our marriage ends here." Maria and Sophia's initial shock quickly morphed into smiles. "Finally getting rid of the dead weight, Marco?" Sophia jeered, her laughter grating on my nerves. But their joy was premature. "Don't get too excited," I interjected sharply. "You might want to sit down for this. It's been me, not Marco, keeping this household afloat." The room fell into stunned silence. Marco's eyes darted between me and his family, the truth finally out in the open. "It's true," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "The restaurant's been failing. Cora's been covering everything. She transferred $4,000 to me every month." Maria and Sophia turned on him, their faces twisted with anger and disbelief. "You lied to us? You let her pay our bills?" Maria's voice was shrill. "What should we do now, without her money?" "Then," Marco continued, his desperation clear, "I'm going to file for alimony. I earn less, so it's only fair." His mother and sister were delighted with this decision and even clapped their hands. Their claps echoed hollowly in the room, but I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. "You think that's going to work, Marco? You won't get a cent from me. Especially not after I found out about your affair." The color drained from his face. "How did you?" he stammered, his false barato crumbling. I pointedly looked at Sophia. "Your sister was kind enough to send me all the proof I needed." The argument that erupted was fierce, the house filled with accusations and betrayals laid bare. Marco and Sophia were shouting at each other, waving their arms. Amid the chaos, I remained calm, my next move clear. "I'm taking back what's mine," I declared, my voice cutting through the noise. "Every appliance, every piece of furniture I paid for. You're left with what you've earned, which is nothing." And that's exactly what I did. I stripped the house of every trace of my financial support, leaving them to face the consequences of their actions. Maria's and Sophia's pleas for mercy, for forgiveness, were ignored. I blocked their numbers, severing the last ties to a life of deceit and disrespect. The fallout was swift. Marco's restaurant crumbled under the weight of debt, the house was lost, and Sophia's husband walked away from the wreckage of their family. They were left with nothing but each other and their mistakes in a cramped rented apartment. As for me, Luca and I flourished in our new life. Our days were filled with love, laughter, and the peace we'd fought so hard to find. The past was behind us, a distant memory overshadowed by the bright future we were building together. We were more than survivors, we were conquerors, and our story was just beginning.
"Get away from my son, you psycho bitch!" I screamed at the top of my lungs, placing myself between Candace and Caleb. Her eyes were wide and crazed, hands outstretched as if to snatch him away from me. Caleb clung to my leg, whimpering in fear. "Mommy, I don't want to go with the mean lady." Candace's perfectly made-up face contorted with rage. "He's my nephew. I'll take him whenever I want." Her diamond-encrusted fingers closed into fists. This wasn't the first time my sister-in-law had tried to force her way into my life and make decisions about my child, but her behavior was becoming more unhinged by the day. "You're delusional, Candace. Caleb is terrified of you." I pulled my son closer, glaring at the woman I once naively considered family. Candace opened her mouth to retort, but the sound of a car door slamming outside cut her off. "Candace, what's going on?" My brother Marcus's voice preceded him through the front door. "Oh, Marcus, thank God you're here." Candace instantly transformed into the picture of a devoted wife. "Your insane sister is keeping my nephew from me again." I wanted to scream at the blatant lie, but Marcus turned his stern gaze on me before I could speak. "Really, Raina? Candace has every right to see Caleb. She barged in here ranting like a lunatic." I shot back, unwilling to back down. "Ask Caleb what she did." "Duh," Candace scoffed loudly. "Please, we both know that boy will just repeat whatever lies his trashy mother tells him." The venom in her voice shouldn't have surprised me, yet the insult still felt like a slap across the face. Candace had been looking down on me and my lower-class existence for years. Marcus sighed heavily. "We're not doing this again, you two. Candace, let's go home." "But Marcus," she began to protest. "Now," he stated with finality, shooting me a disapproving glare before leading his wife out. As the door slammed behind them, I finally released the breath I'd been holding. Caleb was still trembling against me. "It's okay, baby," I whispered, smoothing his hair. "The mean lady is gone now. For today, at least." But deep down, I knew this war with Candace was just beginning. The next morning, I tried to shake off the previous day's events as I got Caleb ready for school. He was uncharacteristically quiet, his usual endless stream of chatter replaced by nervous glances towards the front door. "You don't need to worry, sweetie," I assured him, packing his Spider-Man lunchbox. "Candace isn't allowed to take you from me." Caleb nodded slowly, but his brow remained furrowed. At 6 years old, he'd already experienced too much of his aunt's volatility. My thoughts drifted to my older brother Marcus as I drove Caleb to elementary school. How could he continue enabling Candace's increasingly disturbing behavior? Then again, he'd always been blind to her faults. I remembered when they first started dating in college. Even then, Candace's obsession with status and wealth was on full display. She'd relentlessly mock my second-hand wardrobe, her perfectly plucked eyebrows raised in judgmental disdain. "You'd look so much prettier if you put in a little effort, Raina," she'd sneer with a cruel smirk. "Marcus deserves a real woman, not some dowdy charity case." I grit my teeth, gripping the steering wheel tighter. All these years later, and her elitist taunts still stung. Candace came from an obscenely rich family, born with a silver spoon in her mouth. She took perverse pleasure in reminding me that I'd never be in her social stratosphere. After graduation, Marcus landed a high-paying corporate job, and Candace wasted no time locking him down in marriage. I'd never seen two people more mismatched joined together in supposed holy matrimony. Marcus was so blinded by Candace's looks and the lure of her family's money that he ignored all the red flags: her explosive temper, irrational jealousy, and unsettling mood swings. I tried warning him, but he brushed it off as bridal stress. Shaking my head, I pulled into the school drop-off loop and gave Caleb a reassuring hug. "Have a great day, okay? Don't let mean Aunt Candace ruin it for you." He nodded again, forcing a small smile before heading inside. My heart ached for him. Caleb was such a sweet, gentle boy. He didn't deserve to be subjected to Candace's toxic behavior. As I drove home, my mind raced with memories of the countless times Candace had belittled and mocked me over the years. Her cruelty only intensified after Caleb was born, as if she couldn't stand sharing Marcus's attention and affection. I pulled into my driveway, gripping the steering wheel as flashes of yesterday's confrontation replayed in my mind. The way Candace's eyes had bulged with deranged entitlement as she tried to take my son. Her venomous insults about me being trashy. Something had to be done about her accelerating mental instability before she did real harm. I was tired of being her emotional punching bag. If Marcus refused to see the truth about his wife, I'd make him open his eyes, one way or another. That evening, my parents came over for their weekly family dinner. As I set the table, I could hear Caleb chattering away in the living room, no doubt regaling them with tales from first grade. "Raina, is everything okay, honey?" my mom asked with a concerned frown as she entered the kitchen. Caleb mentioned something about Candace showing up yesterday. I sighed heavily, recounting the unhinged confrontation to my horrified parents. Dad's brow furrowed deeper with each detail. "That woman is completely unstable," he finally said, shaking his head. "I've been telling Marcus for years that she needs professional help." "Well, he's made it quite clear he doesn't want to hear it," I replied bitterly. "He's so obsessed with maintaining their perfect life that he refuses to see Candace for who she really is." Mom reached out and gave my arm a comforting squeeze. "You can't reason with delusional people, sweetheart. All you can do is protect yourself and Caleb." I managed a tight smile, deeply grateful for their unconditional support. At least my family could see Candace's toxicity for what it was. An hour later, we were all seated around the dining table, enjoying the meal I'd prepared. Caleb's endless chatter filled the room, putting me at ease as it always did. That is, until the doorbell rang. I immediately tensed, a knot forming in my stomach. "Please, not here. Not now." "I'll get it," Dad offered gruffly, kissing the top of Mom's head before heading to the front door. Seconds later, the unmistakable sound of Candace's shrill voice reached my ears. "Well, if it isn't the low-class family reunion," she crowed with a derisive laugh as she pushed past Dad into the dining room. My blood immediately began to boil at the insult directed at my parents. Candace, however, seemed utterly unfazed by her rude behavior as usual. "What an absolute dump you live in, Raina," she continued, wrinkling her surgically enhanced nose as she surveyed my modest home. "I guess beggars can't be choosers, though. You have a lot of nerve showing your face here after yesterday." I managed through gritted teeth. Candace simply rolled her eyes. "Please don't act so victimized. I'm here to spend quality time with my nephew, like any good aunt would want." "Over my dead body," I shot back vehemently. In the blink of an eye, Candace's demeanor shifted. Her icy glare landed directly on Caleb, who shrank back in his chair. "Well, well, if it isn't the little liar himself," she hissed, taking a menacing step towards him. That was the final straw. "Get out of my house!" I yelled, placing myself between her and my petrified son. "This isn't over, Raina," Candace snarled as Dad ushered her towards the door. "Not by a long shot." The venom in her parting words sent a chill down my spine. In that moment, I knew this conflict had escalated to a dangerous new level. There would be no more neutrality. It was us, or her. A few weeks later, the annual Baxter family birthday bash for Marcus rolled around. Despite my parents' protests, I decided to attend, if only to keep an eye on Candace's unhinged behavior around Caleb. The party was held at Marcus and Candace's ostentatious mansion, because of course it was. As I pulled up to the circular driveway lined with impeccably trimmed hedges, I felt grossly underdressed in my modest sundress and flats. The other guests' designer labels and dripping jewels made me self-conscious. "Just ignore them, sweetie," I told Caleb as I walked him inside, already bracing myself for Candace's inevitable insults about my appearance. Sure enough, as soon as we entered the lavishly decorated living room, her shrill voice cut through the crowd. "Oh, look who decided to grace us with her presence. Cinderella herself." A trill of mocking laughter followed from the cluster of identically coiffed women surrounding her, all clutching boutique shopping bags. I felt my cheeks flush as their judging eyes raked over my simple outfit. "Nice of you to take a break from scrubbing floors, Raina," Candace continued, sauntering over with a wicked grin. "I almost didn't recognize you without your rags on." Swallowing hard, I fought the urge to hurl my drink in her smug face. I couldn't let her get a rise out of me, not in front of all these strangers. Caleb clutched my hand tighter, sensing the tension. "Happy birthday, Marcus," I forced myself to say as my brother approached, hoping he'd run interference before things escalated. "Thanks for coming," he replied stiffly. With a resigned sigh, he turned to Candace. "Do you have to start with her already? It's supposed to be my day." "Oh, I'm just having a bit of harmless fun." Candace responded with a dismissive hair toss. "Raina knows I'm joking, don't you, sis?" The venom in her syrupy tone made my skin crawl. I opened my mouth to protest, but Marcus cut me off. "You know how Candace gets. Just ignore her." He pulled me into an awkward side hug, his eyes pleading for me not to make a scene. Grinding my molars, I managed a terse nod. I'd been putting up with Candace's jokes for over a decade. What was one more night of torture for Marcus's sake? As the party stretched on, Candace's digs grew increasingly more pointed and more audible. She'd pause meaningfully whenever I walked past, her cronies stifling snickers behind monogrammed clutches. Finally, it was time for Marcus to open gifts. Candace, of course, had to make a grand spectacle of her lavish present. "Here you are, birthday boy," she trilled, placing a small box wrapped in shimmering paper into his hands. "I can't wait to see your face." Marcus obliged, tearing off the wrapping to reveal a sleek designer watch, likely worth more than my entire yearly salary. "It's beautiful, babe," he murmured, pulling Candace in for a kiss as their sycophantic audience cooed. I felt a pang in my chest as I watched them, wondering if I'd ever find someone who could love me like that. My gaze drifted down to the modest little gift bag in my hands, filled with a few inexpensive golf accessories I knew Marcus would appreciate. "Well, Raina?" Candace's shrill voice shattered my thoughts. "Don't you have something for the birthday boy, too?" All eyes turned towards me. Feeling my cheeks burn, I hesitantly stepped forward and handed Marcus the gift bag, mumbling a quiet, "Happy birthday." "Wow, how generous," Candace snarked loudly as he pulled out the mundane golf balls and tees. "I'm sure he'll just cherish that dollar store junk forever." The room's judgmental silence was deafening. Tears of humiliation stung my eyes as I avoided Marcus's pitying gaze, wishing I could simply melt into the floor. Clutching Caleb's hand, I turned and fled from the room, Candace's jeering laughter echoing in my ears. As I reached the front door, one thought crystallized in my mind with cold, hard clarity. This had gone on for far too long. It was time to make that wretched woman pay. The humiliation from Marcus's birthday party hung over me like a dark cloud for days afterward. I couldn't shake the memory of Candace's mocking laughter, the disdainful glances from her vapid socialite friends. I knew I should have been used to her cruelty by now. But having my modest gift so publicly ridiculed in front of my own brother stung more than I cared to admit. As I dropped Caleb off at school one morning, I found myself gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. That smug, heartless woman had gone too far this time. Something had to be done. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the passenger door opening. I turned to see my mom climbing into the car, a look of grim determination on her face. "Good, you're still here," she said without preamble. "We need to talk about Candace." I felt myself tense instinctively at the mention of her name. "What about her?" "Raina, this has gone on for far too long," Mom stated, her tone broking no argument. "The way she treated you at Marcus's party was the final straw for me." Swallowing hard, I slowly nodded in agreement. "I know. Believe me, I know. That woman is unhinged," Mom continued, her voice lowering to a fierce whisper. "Her behavior isn't normal, sweetie. It's becoming dangerous." My chest tightened as disturbing images of Candace's crazed eyes flashed through my mind from our last confrontation. "You're right. I'm just so afraid of what she's capable of, especially around Caleb." Mom reached over and gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. "Which is why we can't just sit back and let her keep terrorizing this family. It's time we take a stand." Her determined words ignited something inside me, a spark of righteous indignation I hadn't felt in years. She was absolutely right. I'd been a passive victim of Candace's abuse for far too long, all in the name of keeping the peace with Marcus. But after her deplorable display at the party, something inside me had shifted. The gloves were finally coming off. "You're right, Mom," I said, feeling a surge of courage course through me. I'm done being Candace's personal punching bag. It's time to fight back. A small smile played across Mom's lips, and I could have sworn I detected a hint of pride in her eyes. That's my girl. So, what's the plan? As I began mapping out my first steps towards revenge, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. No more cowering in fear, no more turning the other cheek. This was war, and I didn't intend to lose. Well, for starters, we need to open Marcus's eyes to who Candace really is, I declared, my voice steadier than it had been in years. He's been blindly defending her for too long. Mom arched an eyebrow. You know your brother better than anyone. What will it take for him to finally see the truth? A muscle twitched in my jaw as I considered her question. I knew exposing Candace's mental instability to Marcus would be an uphill battle. But this time, I was ready to fight with everything I had. Don't worry, I stated with finality. I have a few ideas to make him wake up and smell the venom. Candace wants a war? A hard smile crossed my lips. She's about to get one. The sound of shattering glass jolted me awake with a start. My heart pounded as I sat upright in bed, straining to hear any other noise over the thundering of blood in my ears. Then, a piercing scream shattered the eerie silence. "Caleb!" I gasped, cold dread seizing my body as I recognized my son's terrified cry. Throwing off the covers, I raced down the hallway towards his bedroom, half blinded by panic. As I threw open the door, a chilling sight stopped me dead in my tracks. Caleb cowered in the corner, his little body trembling uncontrollably as shards of broken glass and splintered wood littered the floor around him. The window had been completely shattered, tiny razor-sharp shards glittering in the moonlight like deadly confetti. Mommy," he whimpered between ragged sobs, eyes wide with fear. In that moment, I didn't think I'd ever seen him look so small and vulnerable. "It's okay, baby. I'm here," I managed to force out, my voice shaking as I scooped him up protectively in my arms. He clung to me like a lifeline, his tears soaking through my nightshirt. Rocking him gently, I scanned the wreckage of his room with mounting horror. This wasn't some random act of vandalism. It was a targeted attack. But by who? And why would anyone want to hurt my sweet little boy? The realization hit me like a ton of bricks, driving the air from my lungs. There was only one person unhinged enough to do something this twisted: Candace. As the weight of her depravity sank in, a cold fury began replacing the fear coursing through my veins. That sadistic bitch had gone way too far this time. Putting her jealous hands on me was one thing, but threatening the life of my child? That was unforgivable, unthinkable, inexcusable. "Shh, it's going to be okay," I whispered fiercely into Caleb's hair, hugging him even tighter. I would get to the bottom of this, and make damn sure Candace paid for whatever she'd done, even if it was the last thing I ever did. The next few hours passed by in a blur of police questioning and cleaning up the shattered glass. I must have recounted the same details a dozen times, desperately trying to piece together any clues that could implicate Candace. Marcus showed up at some point, his usual slicked-back hair disheveled as he embraced us both. "Thank God you two are all right," he murmured shakily. "Who would do something like this?" I opened my mouth, ready to unleash all my pent-up rage and suspicion about his twisted wife, but the words never came. One look at Caleb's red-rimmed eyes and trembling lips, and I knew I couldn't put him through that emotional trauma again. Not tonight. So instead, I forced a tight smile and lied through my teeth. "I have no idea. Some punk kid's playing a sick prank, I guess." Marcus sighed heavily, scrubbing a hand down his face. "Jesus, what is this world coming to?" He pulled us both in for a fierce hug, oblivious to the fact that the real monster was much closer than he realized. As his strong arms enveloped us, I caught a whiff of Candace's sickly sweet perfume lingering on his shirt. A chilling reminder that I was anything but safe, even within this embrace. Meeting my son's haunted gaze over Marcus's shoulder, a hard knot of determination formed in the pit of my stomach. Whoever was responsible for this attack was going to pay dearly. If it really was Candace behind this twisted act, she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Because I wasn't just going to expose her malicious lies to Marcus, I was going to utterly destroy her. In the weeks following the attack on Caleb's room, I became a woman possessed. Every waking moment was consumed by the burning desire to make Candace pay for what she'd done. I knew in my bones she was behind it, even if I didn't have concrete proof yet. The smashed window, the threatening message it sent, it reeked of her pathological mind games and escalating instability. She was unraveling and lashing out in increasingly dangerous ways. But this time, I was ready. I'd been pushed to my limit one too many times by that sadistic woman. No more turning the other cheek, no more playing the victim. It was time to fight fire with fire. I started documenting every vindictive slight, every backhanded insult Candace had ever hurled my way over the years. Scouring my emails, texts, even old social media posts, I meticulously compiled evidence of her toxic behavior and disturbing obsession with me. A paper trail that revealed a clear pattern of derangement. I also began carefully cataloging any eyewitness accounts from friends and family who'd been subjected to her outbursts and mood swings. My parents were able to recount dozens of incidents, as were some of Marcus's more clear-eyed coworkers. With each new data point I uncovered, a damning portrait began to take shape. One of a deeply troubled woman whose envy towards me had mutated into a full-blown mental disorder. Someone for whom no attack was off-limits in order to satiate her twisted need for vengeance. Someone who, if left unchecked, could easily snap again and place Caleb's life in danger. That thought alone was enough to fuel my crusade, no matter how underhanded or invasive my tactics became. I started documenting Candace's daily routines, combing her social media for any clues about her deteriorating state of mind. I even went as far as staking out her weekly Pilates class, determined to catch her in the act of an unhinged outburst. I knew Marcus would never believe any of it without proof, hard evidence that he couldn't simply dismiss or rationalize away. His loyalty to his wife was that strong, that blind. But I was going to shatter that delusion once and for all, no matter how much it devastated him. Because in the end, exposing Candace's true nature was the only way I could ensure Caleb's safety. She'd taken her twisted games too far, and I was the only one willing to stop her reign of terror. As I pored over the incriminating materials late one night, I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. I had her. I finally, truly had her. The paper trail didn't lie. It showed a clear, undeniable pattern of mental illness that even Marcus couldn't ignore. Leaning back in my chair, I couldn't resist the hard smile that crept across my face. Candace had been drunk on her wealth and privilege for far too long, blind to consequences. She'd alienated and attacked everyone around her in her downward spiral, leaving behind a wake of destruction. Well, now it was time to reap what she'd sown. The old saying about karma was true. It really was a bitch. And Candace was about to feel its full wrath. I just hoped Marcus could find it in himself to forgive me when this was all over. Taking down his deranged wife would devastate him. But it was a necessary evil to protect my son. My family. No matter how much collateral damage it caused, I knew one thing for certain. Candace's world was about to come crashing down around her, and I was going to be the one swinging the wrecking ball. It was the night of Candace's weekly book club meeting at her mansion. The perfect opportunity to catch her alone and finally unleash the bombshell I'd been meticulously assembling for weeks. As I pulled up to the imposing iron gates, my heart was pounding with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. This was it. The moment I'd been waiting for, when I could shatter her delusional world once and for all. Clutching the bulging manila envelope filled with documented proof of her mental illness, I took a steadying breath before ringing the call box. Seconds later, Candace's saccharine voice crackled through the speaker. "Yes? Who is it?" "It's me," I replied flatly. "We need to talk." There was a pregnant pause before the gate swung open with a metallic groan. I could practically hear the sneer in her tone as she responded. Well, to what do I owe this pleasure?" Gripping the envelope tightly, I steeled myself and strode up the long, winding driveway towards the looming house. Candace was already waiting in the doorway, arms crossed and chin raised in a silent challenge as I approached. "You've got a lot of nerve showing your face here, Raina," she said coldly as I mounted the front steps. "After that despicable stunt you pulled with Marcus last week?" "Can it, Candace?" I cut her off, taking a small vindictive pleasure in her look of shock. "We both know why I'm really here." Her icy glare narrowed suspiciously. "And what's that supposed to mean?" Wordlessly, I thrust the overstuffed envelope into her hands, my jaw clenched tightly. "See for yourself." Keeping one wary eye trained on me, Candace flipped open the envelope and began rifling through the stack of documents and photos inside. I watched in tense silence as her perfectly arched eyebrows slowly knit together, lips pursing tighter and tighter with each damning page. "What is this?" she finally hissed, whipping her venomous glare back up to me. "Some pathetic attempt at blackmail?" I shook my head, feeling a grim smile tug at the corners of my mouth. "Not blackmail, Candace. The truth." Her eyes widened fractionally as she seemed to realize the full implications of what she was looking at. I could see the panic starting to set in as the evidence mounted, a clear, undeniable pattern of unhinged behavior, obsessive jealousy, and severe mental issues. "You deranged little bitch," she spat, cheeks flushing crimson with rage as she hurled the papers at my feet. "You think this proves anything? Marcus would never believe your insane lies." "Oh, I don't think he'll need much convincing once he sees all this," I countered coolly, gesturing to the scattered documents. "Not after the little message you sent Caleb a few weeks ago." Her face drained of color at my pointed reference to the night she'd shattered my son's bedroom window. For a brief moment, she seemed to teeter on the edge of losing her carefully constructed composure entirely. But just as quickly, her mask of indignant fury slammed back into place. "You have no proof," she snarled, taking a menacing step towards me. "This is all just sad, pathetic conjecture on your part, a desperate ploy for attention, as always." I held my ground, locking eyes with her as I delivered my parting words with cold finality. "That's what you think, Candace. But pretty soon, Marcus is going to see the truth. He's going to see what a deranged, twisted shell of a human being he married." I paused, letting the weight of my promise sink in. "And when he does, your precious life of wealth and privilege is going to come crumbling down around you." Her face contorted in a mask of pure unrestrained hatred. "You'll regret this, Raina," she seethed through gritted teeth. "You have no idea what you've just unleashed." Turning on my heel, I left her seething on the doorstep and headed back towards my car, each step lighter than the last. I knew there would be hell to pay for my actions in the coming days, but I didn't care. The wheels were finally in motion. Candace's downfall was inevitable, and nothing would stop me from watching her world burn.